Hey, welcome back to Dispatches from Holly McKay. Today we're going to have a little Q&A session, and we're going to be talking to Holly about what it's like to prepare for and come back from these international coverage assignments that she goes on. So, Holly, you're back in the United States right now, and in the process of writing up all of the material that you collected on your last trip and simultaneously preparing for your next one. Which from a point of view of journalism and how journalism is done, I think would be very interesting for people to hear a little bit about how that works for you. So what is that cycle of coming back from someplace in the world and then preparing to go back out?
Well, I think coming back, it's just as important as going out because the coming back is the weeks that I sort of spend, or sometimes days, depending on what is happening. It's really doing the writing and doing putting the notes together. So previously in my life at Fox, when I worked in sort of a bustling newsroom in New York or Los Angeles, it would be working on the fly. And that is still the case, if it's a breaking news situation like the fall of Afghanistan, which I was there for, or Ukraine invasion as well, where it is breaking news. So you have to kind of work while you're there and sort of in the midst of it and kind of get those stories out daily, which is very stressful in itself because I'm a solo team. So it is, you're out all day getting the information, collecting it, interviews, photos, whatever that may be. And you sort of have to come back. You have to transcribe everything, which I don't have a transcriber. So that in itself is a very long process and background information and put a story together. Those experiences are quite stressful because you basically end up with about 2 hours sleep every night, and that can go on for a really long time. So you have to kind of adapt to that. But with my current sort of situation in life and working, as a content director with Liberty, which is sort of focused on defense and veterans and crypto and other things, I actually have the luxury and freelancing on top of that. I have the luxury of spending time on stories and being able to just really, when I go out on the assignments now, as opposed to sort of focusing and writing and transcribing and things like that, I can sort of just focus on the research and understanding, really going out to the field from 5 a.m. in the morning till 11 p.m. at night and just gathering as sort of much material and as I can in whatever space of time that is, and then coming back and sort of having that time to um, transcribe, go through all my notes, go through my phones, look at my photos, and sort of piece together a little bit more of a long form feature, which is sort of the writing that I prefer to do now. I think I've certainly done my fill for 14 years of breaking news, so it's really nice to sort of have that time to kind of investigate a situation and to I think hopefully at this point in my career maybe do a little bit more justice to a story because you do have that sort of reflection and to go a little bit deeper often than you can in breaking news. And both types of news and writing very much serve an important purpose and a different purpose. But with the work I do now, it's a lot more narrative driven, I think. So a lot of it is first person and it's about sort of being able to bring people into that realm as opposed to a little bit more dry news writing. So it's sort of the sort of writing that I prefer to do with my books and other things as well. So, but that writing time, if I've only got a small window of time in between trips, it's very intense and it takes a lot to put together a story. And so it is really long days of fact checking, of really just going through everything and making sure that I get the most important parts of it. And of course, transcribing is my kryptonite. That is the part that often takes really the longest of all of it and probably the least enjoyable, but a really important part. And one thing is I'm glad I do it myself because it enables me to really refresh my brain, to sort of go back to listen to the way that the subject talked about a situation, to identify the pauses, the moments of their reflection, how their tone changes, and sometimes it's just as important what they don't say as to what they do. So I, as much as I sort of hate that process, it is useful to, as a writer, to be able to do that myself.
Okay. So, how long have you been back now from the last trip? About a month and a half? thereabouts?
No, not that long. 3 weeks.
3 weeks. Okay. So in the last 3 weeks, um, how much work has it been? Is it mostly been transcribing, or are you
It's been a
actually?
lot of work. I mean, I've put in probably more writing hours because I am preparing sort of for another trip, which we'll talk about on another date. But so it's really trying to get that content done. Um, Unfortunately, my book stuff is a little bit neglected. So my goal is definitely December, January to once I do this last trip, spend a little bit of time really just focusing on the book stuff as opposed to the more day-to-day writing. So putting that together is those stories is sort of one aspect of what I'm doing. I still take a lot of meetings. I still network, and that's all important parts of being a writer is keeping your sources, finding new material too. Today I was at lunch with some people that had just come from South Sudan that live there, and one of them, had some fascinating things to say. It was very much the sort of inside in Juba and the corruption. And so it's not that I'm working on a specific story with that gentleman, but I am, I'm learning about different things and planning for the future. And brain is always constantly looking for different ways to tell stories. Also, with my work with Liberty, it's not just the kind of human interest and military-esque stories, but a big part of what I do for them is veterans sort of centered stories and profiling different veterans with incredible stories to tell. And also with Liberty, the plan is to launch a blockchain, so it is also part of bringing in a little bit of understanding in sort of the crypto world as well. And so it sort of seems discombobulated, but it's not really. It's a chance to bring all these different elements together under one roof, and I learn as I go too. So I have a sort of those three different components, and I sort of try to balance them and tell those different types of stories, I guess. And for me, it really is finding those unique stories and the vignettes, as you say, Dennis. Maybe that other journalists or the mainstream media aren't necessarily highlighting, but they're a good and they're an interesting read for people. And I think sometimes you take those micro stories, so you take somebody's individual story. Maybe it's a veteran inside a city, or maybe it's somebody that is rescuing people, from a third world country, whatever that may be. You take those individual stories and you can micro stories and you can create this macro picture that I think enables people to understand these faraway places a little bit more, and with that little bit more of a personal connection. So that's sort of the way that I like to approach my work as much as possible.
Yeah, there you go. So, last question. How much do you still use your notebooks after all these years?
I still use them a lot. I'll always have my notebook with me. I used to sort of shorthand write when I was doing interviews. I have kind of moved away from that a little bit now, and I do use my phone to record, but I always have my notebook on my lap because as they're speaking, I'm thinking of things that I have to ask them or follow-ups or making an observation about um, how they said something or what they were wearing or what the room looked like. And so that's always sort of being jotted down in my notebooks. And it's actually great. I'm glad that I moved into a little bit more of the technology realm because it enables me, I think, to be a little bit more in the moment when I'm interviewing, because I'm not sort of worried about writing it down and I can make sure that I don't miss anything. And at the same time, I always have that backup. To make sure that I get the quote exactly as they said it, or I can go back and check something. So that is always really helpful. So I think I did it the hard way for a really long time, but I find this method to only enhance my work.
Okay. Well, okay. So that's the cleanup. What's the prep for the next one? Or what's the prep for the
That's also that comes into it too, and it's always hard. You have to go in to a country, I think, with a little bit of an idea of what you want to get out of it, what you are pursuing. But I think you have to be careful at the same time, to be very open to ideas, and because you always will learn something on the ground. You'll see something, you'll hear something that you didn't know before, because that's just the reality of being on the ground. That you can read every policy paper, every magazine article, whatever it may be imaginable, but there will always be something that you learn or find on the ground that's just like, oh, if I didn't know this surely there must be a lot of other people who didn't know this, and this is really interesting. So I think it's good to go in with a good base of knowledge and have a sort of a strong sense of what you want to achieve, but at the same time, also be very open minded to the things that will come up, and to have that ability to sort of coalesce those two things together. And so having a strong knowledge and researching and talking to people that are there and already, and that's super important, um but not overkill at the same time. So it's a sort of a delicate balance.
There you go. All right, so let's have Holly, the teacher, here for a second. What do you tell a young person that's thinking of going into foreign correspondence today in today's world?
So many things. It's certainly a challenging job. I mean, it's a lifestyle really, and that's the that's the real kicker. It is a lifestyle because you might be in a country, you come back, but you're still in that country sort of mentally, especially if it was a very harrowing experience. Um, you're trying to learn, basic different languages, you're trying to understand different conflicts, and it depends whether you're somebody like myself who works in a variety of different countries wherever there is the story, and then there are some foreign correspondents that are specifically focused to certain parts of the world, and that's not always sort of conflict driven either. But for the conflict driven work, yeah, I always say it's a lifestyle job because you have to sacrifice a lot of other things to sort of do it. You'll miss weddings, you'll miss birthdays, you'll miss Christmas, Thanksgiving, whatever it may be, if you need to be out there for the story. And sometimes it's not always easy to leave these places just logistically. So you have to, give yourself sort of a window of time even to get out. So yeah, it's a lifestyle job for the most part. It's not going to pay you well. Freelancing doesn't pay well at all, which we can have a conversation about another day. But you have to do it because you love it. And if there's something else that you think that you want to do in life, perhaps you want to go into banking or be a dentist or whatever it is, go do that. Because if you don't have that 100% conviction that this is what you do and that you don't necessarily care about money, and that you are willing to kind of give up a lot, then it's something to look at. And it's an amazing job. I mean, I can't imagine doing anything else with my life. And um, the experiences and the people that you meet, and sort of being on that ground, and it's sort of unparalleled. And I think for me, I was always eager to get out in the world, and didn't have much interest in grad school and I don't know, studying or, being kind of in a policy institute per se. That's not to say that at some point in my life I won't go into that. But, for me right now, it's just being on the ground is really an important thing to me. But I think as I've gotten a little bit older, I've been able to find the balance a little bit better with making the best use of being home that I can, and creating a space that's enjoyable to work in and to write in, and to sort of have friends and family and things like that is high on the agenda in between those trips. So, but that balance is always it's a tenuous balance, and it sort of took me a long time to get here. But certainly, if you do want to do this sort of work, you've just got to love it. You've got to love it with every part of your body, and not imagine doing anything else. And I still have that burning desire that I think I had when I started doing it. So that's what keeps me doing it. But yeah, I remember the restless nights, the burning desire, the need to get to a place, and it consumes you. And so I think if you have that, then that's the first quality of several other things that you have to get squared away.
Oh, there you go. Well, as somebody who has walked some of this path with you, I can attest to the fact that your dedication is unparalleled. And as somebody who has had a hand in keeping track of you when you were out in the field, both brave and worrying at times, because you have gone to places that very few people have actually been able to touch and have seen them firsthand. I can and it has been your lifestyle. So thank you, Holly, for sharing that, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Dennis.